All right, here we are. We are coming at you live. We're rumbling, we're Facebooking, and we're YouTubing live. Common Sense Ohio on April 23rd, 2025. Stay tuned because we are playing hooky today with KBJ. That's Ketanji Brown Jackson. I don't know if they're fishing or they're playing video games these days, probably. Anyway, so we're going to talk about the U.S. Supreme Court playing hooky. Apparently, the United States, you can check in, but you can't check out, at least not so easily. We're going to talk about the U.S. Supreme Court and what they're saying with Trump. And who's your daddy in Ohio, Norm? Is it Mr. DeWine or is it you? We will talk all about it. So Common Sense Ohio, stay tuned. Brought to you by Harper Plus Accounting. I know Glenn Harper over at Harper Plus enjoying a nice reprieve, but only a short one, having gotten through tax season. How do I know? Because I talk to him all the time. He's my accountant. Could be yours, Harper Plus Accounting. All right. This day in history, and by the way, I've been gone. So this week in history, this 2 weeks in history.
Welcome back, dude. You were missed.
I know nothing. I'm Sergeant Solch today. I'm here to comment only, but I'll do my best. I would say, though, I looked up April 23rd, 2025, the day attributable to not only Shakespeare's birth, but also his death. And that reminded me of a quote that might be sort of relevant today. Let me have men about me that are fat, sleek-headed men, as such as sleep at night. Jan Cassius has a lean and hungry look. He looks too much, or he thinks too much. Such men are dangerous. This is, of course, Shakespeare. And this is like as Shakespeare, or not Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, Shakespeare, Julius Caesar. Mm-hmm. And as he did so well, the foreshadowing, and you can just imagine that speech in a play format. And then it goes on. He's talking to Mark Antony. He goes on to talk about who he's afraid of and what he's afraid of. And he says he's afraid of nothing. And his final quote in this little thing were, well, there's even more. Would he were fatter, but I fear him not. Yet if my name were liable to fear, in other words, he's a fearful guy, but I'm not afraid of him. Interesting, because he ends up dying. But then he says, I'd rather tell thee what is to be feared than what I fear. For always I am Caesar. Trump should beware. I think he seems like he's afraid of nothing, but there are people out to get him. There are people out to stop him. There are people out to stop his agenda, agree with him or not. Yeah. You've got folks out there who are interested in blowing up Tesla factories or Tesla cars, and you've got folks killing United Healthcare executives, all in the name of the cause, right? And that's sort of like the theme of that play. It was like as I loved him, I had to kill him. Sort of at the end, and it is, or as he was ambitious, I had to kill him. Finding justification to commit murder, or maybe metaphorically to employ means that aren't necessarily, let's just say, noble.
Yeah.
To stop somebody you disagree with.
Right.
That is my Shakespeare.
That's excellent.
Relation to the day. How did I come up with that? I have no idea. I remember my high school Shakespeare class.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. So we just had.
I thank you, Mr. Dybert.
We just had a rather epic death. The death of the Pope the morning after Easter. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty providential. That for God, for those who believe in God, like us three, Catholic or not, it's providential that God would allow the head of the Catholic Church to survive through Easter Day, go to the Mass, appear at the Mass, say some words to the crowd, be the Pope, meet with J.D. Vance, and then the next morning, he's gone. I mean, that is, if you're going to leave the earth and go to the afterlife, to heaven, we hope there's one, exactly. There is no more dramatic way for a pope to exit stage left than that.
And I would, and this is not going to be my outrage for the week, but I would like to basically put shame on those that just discredited Vance. It's like, oh, look who killed the Pope, Vance. Look who killed the Pope, Vance. It's like, come on. I mean, again, okay, it can be a little funny in your head, whatever, especially if you really truly hate Vance. But that is, I can't even put words around it. It's not defending Vance. It's like quits ruining the day, I guess you could say.
Well, quit ruining,
with the Pope passing,
with your earthly nonsense.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's put it this way: have you ever run across somebody? Let's meet somebody, knew somebody, and you potentially might have been the last person that they ever saw.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty moving, and that's happened to me.
Yes, it is.
And this person was not even ill.
And
I was one of the last few people to see him.
Yeah.
And it was odd because I was there collecting, I was in radio at the time, and I was in sales and collecting a check from the guy.
That's
so
heavy.
in my mind going, oh my God, did I kill him because I broke the
evil
bank?
tax collector.
Exactly.
Right.
But it's that I was one of the last few people that saw him. And Vance has to be thinking the same thing. It's like, oh my gosh.
It's a heavy thought.
It's a heavy thought.
And he's a converted Catholic. I think 2019, he became Catholic.
So, let's hope the 20 minutes did something for both of them.
I'm sure it did.
I hope.
Right? Because whether you agree with the Pope's politics and his dilly-dallying into like things like immigration and tying that to Christianity, etc.
Animal rights. I mean, he got into some far-flung stuff.
And I'm no biblical scholar, but I know you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and render unto God what is God. Those two things should be separate. And I think that's what Christ was saying there. Yeah. It's like, now he was talking about tax collection, et cetera, but there was a bigger point to be made. And
the temporal world over here, the world of, trying to save your soul over there.
Right. Or do well. Yeah. And so I think for the church to inject into those political endeavors was a bridge too far.
It was. Absolutely.
But still, he was the Pope.
Yeah.
And interesting.
And the Pope's
Popes
never, they can't do anything right. So people still criticize Pope Pius. What was it? I think Pope Pius was a Pope during World War II. And of course, he's credited with saving, millions of refugees, but yet supposedly he didn't do enough to combat Hitler. So I don't know what was he going to do? Send the Swiss Guard?
Right.
Yeah. I don't, but it's so you can't there. He was supposed to get involved in politics, right? Allegedly, and as if Hitler couldn't have sent one division and roll right through the Vatican. Okay, well, you want to get mouthy, you're gone. So you're right, Steve. Pope Francis. So I'm a Catholic. I disagreed with him on a whole list of things, but there's no question, even if he might have been naive or been extremely progressive or however you want to put it, he was a gentle, modest man. He drove his own little Fiat around town. He didn't take the Pope mobile until he couldn't drive. He lived not in the big palace wearing the fancy slippers and all that. He lived in a little apartment off campus, if you will. So there was much to admire about him.
Sure. And maybe that's a lesson for everybody.
Yeah.
And Brett, to your point earlier, it reminded me of a conversation I had with somebody last week. I was involved in a hearing out in a different county. And, when you get involved in these kind of things, it's brutal. It's an adversarial system for a reason. So you go after each other a little bit.
Yeah.
And a colleague of mine says, I don't know why you're so nice. Why do you treat them better than they're treating us? And it didn't, without even thinking about it, I don't take credit for this because I give this credit to my biblical studies, but I just looked at him and said, well, I try to treat everybody better than they treat me.
Right.
And I think that is the message here.
Right.
If this is the last person you see, treat them better than you think, even better than they deserve, maybe.
Yeah.
Because not for no other reason, it makes me feel better.
Right. I mean, what have you got to lose?
Selfish.
There's nothing to lose by doing that.
And this is a very biblical lesson. Believe or not believe. Still a good lesson.
Yeah.
Well, I thought we'd dive into this Supreme Court case that got argued yesterday at the Supreme Court involving Prince William County, Maryland. Parents' rights case. The basic issue is the right to opt out is what the parents are asking for. So they're not asking for the curriculum to be changed. They're asking to be able to opt out of DEI-related classes. So as you know, pretty much nationwide DEI programs have been shutting down, but school districts and universities are looking for ways to reconstitute it or further embed it in the lesson of the day. And one of those, items that you use to teach is, of course, school books. And one of the exhibits brought forward by the parents' attorneys was a age 5 to age 8 book. It wasn't Dr. Seuss. It was a book full of, if you will, perverted or non-traditional sexual mores.
And what were the ages for the kids that were reading this book?
5 to 8.
Yeah, I don't care if it's non-traditional. I don't care if it's traditional.
Yeah,
I see. This is the thing. I mean, this is like we are into new territory.
Yeah,
where who's responsible for educating your children on those things?
Right.
And to the extent we've given the government the power through the Department of Education or whatever to cram down this curriculum, we've given up a little bit of control, I think. And, that there's a bigger, maybe not bigger, but that's the bigger question at play.
Yeah. So you sound a little bit, Steve, like Justice Elaine Kagan yesterday, who, is a liberal and was appointed by liberal.
To me, this is irrelevant. Politics are relevant.
But I think it's relevant to her point. And she said, setting aside the religious objections by the Muslim parents who brought this, as well as the Christian parents, they teamed up to bring this case. She said, I find it essentially, this isn't word for word, but her statement was that she found it shocking that regardless of the religious argument, that there is this kind of, if you will, grooming, sexual content for children of that age, and she found that objectionable. And she asked the people representing the school district, how can you justify that kind? So it was questions like, pick out the drag queen in the book. In the back, you would match the picture of the drag queen, and there would be a definition of what a drag queen is in the back of the book, and you would match it.
Sounds like a good old-fashioned matching test.
Exactly.
Right? Do you get to draw lines?
I mean, Steve, what is that? I mean,
so look,
crazy.
I mean, the hard part about this, though, is if the Supreme Court is hearing it, there's got to be a constitutional basis for the Supreme Court to hear it.
And it was the religious angle that they used.
It would have to be the religious angle because, look, I think I've covered this ground before. We've talked about this similarly. Like, we have never, as a country, our founders never would have even thought about this kind of problem. I mean, you wouldn't even consider it. It is so far afield
because it's indecent
from anything.
Like, what decent person does that to little kids?
That's right.
I mean,
so like I've run into things at school. Taking this out of DEI maybe is the if we're going to take it out of the Constitution, out of DEI. We went through around in Ohio and other places in the country, whole language reading. I've talked about this before on the show. Right. So the curriculum involved whole language reading, which is basically you memorize a bunch of little 3-letter words and then eventually it clicks and you can read. Well, that's great for about 80, 60, 70, 80% of the kids, but the other 20% don't learn how to read that way. In fact, it's counter educational for their ability to read.
Yeah.
And they need phonetics. And everybody remembers, my age remembers, like after I learned to read, came all these commercials like Hooked on Phonics and all this stuff. Because that's whole language is taking place and kids couldn't read.
Yeah.
So there was a bunch of lawsuits, a bunch of challenges. Well, nobody was grousing. I mean, look, the people that were pushing whole language reading were against it, but like you wouldn't have said, nobody would have complained if I opt out of whole language reading. In fact, I'm going to say nobody, the school still might have complained, but I didn't think for 2 seconds to look at that teacher in the face and say, look, my kid can't read. And because I remember having this conversation, well, look, how do you know he's passing all these things? Well, that's because the kids were really, really smart.
Yeah.
A lot of like dyslexia, and it tracks with really good memories and being very smart and high IQs, et cetera. And I'm not saying my kids are smart, but this is normal. And so they can fake it.
Yeah.
But they can't learn to read. And they said, I remember a argument I had, and they said, well, look, how do you know? Because our testing says good. I said, well, why don't we just call him in here and you give him a paragraph to read and you see how well he does. And they all just stopped. Said, I read with this kid every single night.
Well, unlike being able to opt out and get tutoring help,
That's right. Now you're stuck.
So Gorsuch, Justice Gorsuch asked the defendants, the school district, well, why can't they opt out? Like, what is the big deal? Essentially.
Yeah, why do you care?
And then
if it's no big deal, why is it a big deal?
Because the policy at this school district is that if were you to opt out or were your kids not to show up, they're not going to graduate. Like, that is the reading class. There is no other reading class. Mm-hmm. You are compelled to be there, to which Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson said to the defendants in her questioning, well, just don't go to a public school. Like, you have that choice. And it's like, really all the 50 states don't have school choice yet, number one. Wow. Number two, were you not to send your kids to public school, then you have to pay tuition to somebody else.
To a private school.
So where does that leave poor or middle class families?
Like so many of these things, you end up screwed, right? You end up I would bet, I would love to see the stats on this, Norm. You may even know how many of these people cramming down this policy actually send their kids to public schools.
That would be interesting because a lot of time, like the Obama family certainly didn't. They sent him off to the Quaker school in D.C. Yeah. Meanwhile, he killed off the school choice plan for the D.C.
That's right.
District.
So, so politically speaking, how's this any different than letting a kid opt out of the Pledge of Allegiance or opt out of a prayer at school or opt out of anything? To say just don't go to public school,
right? You
might hear that we'll choose a different private school. But you wouldn't like it. No. It sort of turns it on the air. This is why we were playing hooky with KBJ. So it's like
I say to my friends that
find that one a little bit.
I say to my friends because I want good public schools. I mean, I want them to be excellent, and there are several like Upper Arlington here in town.
Yeah, don't get me started.
Or I just talking academics. How they do on tests. Walnut Hills in Cincinnati. I'm sure there's one or two excellent ones in Cleveland. But so I want them to do well. But I would say to my public school advocates and my pro-teacher advocates, this is the kind of crap that is hollowing out public schools.
Well, look,
this is why people are not choosing to go there anymore, is because when you're rigid and when you're teaching crazy shit, like this to little kids, parents are not going to have it.
Well, and here's the problem. My kids both went to Upper Arlington, and I see some of the assignments coming home, and my son says, I don't agree with he goes, I just say what they want me to say.
Yeah.
And I get along.
Right.
And that's that.
Right.
And he goes, you
and
don't
people
understand,
do that
Dad.
In law school too.
Yeah, you don't understand, Dad. If I go and if I don't agree with this, I'll get a worse grade. And I think, sadly, he's right.
He is right.
Yeah, I think sadly he's right.
Well, he wouldn't say it unless he's seen that example.
Yeah.
Or he's felt
feels
it
that way.
It feels that way, or it felt it from a friend or something.
You're onto something there, Brett, because it's not just that it would happen, it's that he feels that would happen. And look, this is counter the educational experience that I think is so valuable in the Western world, to provoke thought, not discourage it.
Exactly.
So if he feels a certain way and wants to voice an opinion and feels like he's going to be chastised for that opinion, that is the antithesis of the Socratic Western educational system. It is like you learn by provoking thought, not by suppressing thought.
That's right.
That's what the education should be. And this is, they're cramming this down. And if you disagree with this, they're saying not only can't you disagree, like you have no choice.
You have no other option. Right.
So Randy Weingarten, who is the president of the Teachers Union nationally, she said the purpose of these kinds of policies is to teach acceptance of other people that are different than you. Well, I would just say to her, that is not the purpose of school.
Well, it's quite the opposite. These people are saying, I'm different. I don't agree with this.
Exactly.
And yet you're discouraging it. Look, this eats itself.
It eats itself.
The logic eats itself.
That's right.
It just is. And look, I mean, what is the interest of the teachers union? I mean, do the math.
Yeah.
Do the math.
Right.
So
well, and you're talking about an age group that's pretty well accepting already, correct? I mean, you kind of get hardened with different religion, races, and such as you get older.
Look, my kids didn't
the
understand.
age group doesn't make sense.
I was blown away because look, when I had kids and you grow, I was an adult, you have your kids and they start going to school and you don't think much of it.
Yeah.
But we're very aware of race. We're very aware of religion. We're very aware of different ideas as adults. And, and my kids were blissfully unaware of those things. They didn't care if somebody was black. They didn't care if somebody was white. They didn't care if you were gay. They didn't care about any of it.
They weren't taught about it one way or the other.
And that is not a credit to me and my household, but I think that was a credit to the generational changes that we've had on these things.
Absolutely.
At home. Right. At home.
Right.
I didn't learn that. I mean, at home, he learned those things at home. Like nobody said at home, don't like black people. Nobody said at home, don't like gay people. Nobody said at home, don't like Muslims or don't like them or don't like them. So they didn't go in with any predetermined, to your point, Brett, they didn't go in with any predetermined notions on this. I don't need the school to teach that. All right. Because even if you are trying to teach it, the kids are going to go home. And if the home doesn't, if whoever's at home doesn't agree with you, guess what?
Well, forget,
Yeah,
you
they're
know,
gonna
I
teach them
would,
something different.
I go even beyond that. Forget about whether or not it's good, bad as adults to have gay marriages, because that was one of the other things featured in the book. The book would show two daddies or two mommies, and in normalizing that. And for parents who feel very strongly that, yes, as an adult, two gays can, you know, have a union, and, you know, that doesn't affect my household directly, but I don't want my kids growing up thinking that is a normal option. Right. They have the right within their family structure to simply say, no, it's not good.
Right. It's not right. We don't believe those things.
Yeah, we believe it's better for a mom and a dad to raise a kid than two moms or two dads.
What they are doing, what the school is doing,
they have a right to think that,
is taking a position to the exclusion of another position.
That's right.
And while doing that, they're accusing the parents, or they're doing it for the purpose, the stated purpose, really, to combat the parents doing the same thing.
That's right.
And it's just an opposite, right?
That's right.
So they're saying, look, the parents don't know better, so we're going to teach it, and that's that.
It's a
and
battle
we're
over
right and they're wrong, is what they're saying.
It's a battle over teaching what is acceptable and normal, and we have differences of opinion about
and meanwhile, why don't we teach a little bit about World War II? Why don't we teach about the Great Depression? Why don't we teach about like the things that really matter?
I wonder where this would stand if it wasn't, they were not, to your point of the gay marriage, or the book also showcases two mommies, two daddies, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I wonder where it would land if it was mixed marriage.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just throw that out.
Well, I'll answer
because that has become normalized.
I will.
In our generation,
it's very simple.
It was
very simple to answer that question.
Right.
So that was presented to the Supreme Court with Bob Jones University. Mm-hmm. And you know what they did? They took away their tax exempt status because that is illegal to tell the student body that black and white kids can't date each other. And that was a Bob Jones University policy. Yeah. So they said, if you're going to do that, right? If you're going to do that, which is against the law, then you're not tax exempt. Right. So that's the answer. That's what happens.
Yeah. I mean, look, it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. This is the ultimate culmination of years of this stuff, and parents just finally saying enough's enough. And it takes a long time for our system to, for these issues to sort of matriculate up, if that's the right word, or make their way up to get a decision. So I don't think this can be attributable just to the Trump presidency. I mean, this stuff has been brewing for a long time.
I mean, take the cake baker in Colorado. Right. Exactly. That's right. There is a series of cases that are more and more in favor of people's right to practice religion and to have their own viewpoints. And the Supreme Court has been leading the way on that.
Yeah, on both sides. And to me, look, as far as liberal or conservative, just or whatever, I've often found that those labels don't always reflect what people think they reflect.
Well, Kagan.
Like Kagan, right? So,
exactly.
Some of this doesn't make any sense, and if it constitutionally or otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think this is just stuff that you have some fringe groups really pushing this narrative on, and they think that they are doing God's work, so to speak, by advancing a curriculum that they believe in. And I'm not saying that you're wrong. Look, I think you're wrong, or I disagree with you. But look, it doesn't mean that you get to teach everybody.
You're brainwashing kids of parents that do not want this.
And the bigger question is, and this will shift us over to DeWine and who's your daddy? Who's your daddy? Who's raising the kids? Is it the government, or is it happening at the household? Because I think Western civilization was built on a structure that the household is what rules, right? So we like from all the way down, it really is formulated on our households.
Well, let's go to
the parents raising their children with certain value systems.
Yeah.
And moving it forward. So look,
let's go to the hell, the path to hell is paved with good intentions department. So you have this, on the face of it, very beautiful program, even though we haven't gotten a tax cut here in Ohio for property or income. So you got Governor DeWine, right? Is going to spend money, right? Because nothing's free. Now they're advertising this as free to the families. And what it is, it's called the mobile, this is an Ohio program, the Mobile Response and Stabilization Service. So MRSS, administered through the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addictive Services.
I don't even understand what the heck that is.
Yeah.
What is that?
It's basically social workers. Essentially, conducting. So I was actually Norm Murdoch, was the lobbyist to get a license for addiction counselors here in Ohio. I did that about 15 years ago as a lobbyist for, thousands of these counselors who hitherto were not licensed. They were just putting out a shingle and saying, yeah, I'll do addiction services. So anyway, they come under this department. And what this does for anybody who's 20 years old or younger, so it's aimed at children and young adults. If you're 21, you're too old. So it's 20 and under. You can call this 888 number, and within 60 minutes, an hour, they send a professional, a doctor, a nurse, a social worker. They send somebody, either a department employee or a contractor, to your house. And this exists right now in 50 counties in Ohio. The announcement yesterday by Governor DeWine is we're extending it to all 88 counties. We're putting more money into this program. And what they get is an immediate response. So that's why they're calling it the mobile response. And they also get these services for up to 6 weeks, thereafter free of charge by the taxpayer. So it's not free, but it's free to the person being served. And the trigger to get somebody to come out is anything that the student or the young person is upset about. And they will respond to the home, to the school, wherever that child is, at a truck stop, wherever they are. And it sounds like a great idea, right? Until you start to think about, well, what is the follow-up? So a kid calls and says, hey, my mom spanks me when I use the F-bomb. I'm going to call the 888 number, have them come to the house and straighten my mom out. And, this gets to kind of what Steve was talking about.
Yeah, you get to the point where the government is intervening. And look, it's always a careful balance, because there are situations. I mean, we should be at least intellectually honest about this. There are situations where there are crises that need help.
Right.
And there are social workers out there that provide that kind of help.
Right.
All sounds great.
Yep.
But the line gets blurry. It gets really blurry. And, you could say that we need to have this, and that you'd probably be true. You'd probably be accurate on some level, but we're missing the other need, which is why, what do we need to, is there a way that we can encourage the family structure to develop the way it used to? And so we don't need these kind of things, or we don't have these kind of crises.
How did we survive for 225 years?
How are kids getting to the point where they're having these crises?
Yeah.
And maybe we could look in the mirror a little bit, everybody, and say, what are we doing to our kids? What are we like? Where have we gone awry on this?
Right.
And I don't think anybody's studying that legitimately. And I don't know if anybody really wants to know the actual answer to that.
Because no voter wants to be called a bad parent.
That's right.
And no politician is going to call a parent a bad parent. So we have to, it almost feels like this is DeWine's guilt number because of the school. Was the situation where if you don't feel like you're a guy anymore, the sexual disorientation, let's put it that way.
Yep.
So if you can't get it at school, you call this number.
You call this number and you get it right.
I wonder if this is again. I'm not saying
you can easily see it. You can see it morphing into that.
That's what came to mind right away to me. Is like, okay, if you're not getting help at school, you're going to call this number. And And again, I think you're right. This number is. There are situations kids need help.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Both mom and dad are pieces of crap.
Right.
And the whole family's a piece of crap. They need help.
Right.
And thank goodness we're providing something.
And where do we draw the line, though? That's always the problem. Where do you draw the line? So like you said, Norm, look, I have been in disciplined situations with my boys where I'm sure if they had a crisis number, they could call somebody.
Sure.
Right? And there's a YouTube video. I've seen it. It's popped up a couple times, some viral video where the cop shows up because the parent or the kid called on the parent.
Right.
And the cop, I can't remember how it unfolded, but the cop takes the parent's side.
Oh, yeah.
And, that's what you'd want to happen.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Like, look, you don't get to have a cookie for breakfast, and you can throw all the tantrum you want. In that kid's eyes right then, that's a crisis.
Yes.
That's a crisis.
Sure it is.
Right?
In a 6-year-old mind.
Now, if you escalate that, like, look, no, son, I'm taking your car away because you didn't do your chores.
Right.
That's a crisis. How am I supposed to get to school?
Or I
How am
found beer
supposed to do
cans
this?
in
Or
the
I'm
back
gonna-
seat.
Yeah, I found
You
beer
know.
cans in the back seat. So now you're taking the bus for a week.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big crisis.
Right.
But where is it now? Those are extreme examples. But what if it gets a little bit more blurry and you don't know if it's a crisis? And you go to the parents and say, "Look, I've been struggling with this for years. I'm on it." And then is the government really going to say, "Okay, we trust you"?
Yeah.
No big deal. We trust you. And anybody who's had children's services in their lives, they can be very helpful. They can be a real big pain in the ass. So look.
Oh, we're sure. Yeah.
Look, because, and I've said this thousands of times, the government is made of people. People are inherently subject to human frailties and flaws. So therefore, the government is made up of people that are subject to inherent human frailties and flaws. That means it's not perfect. So don't think that the government can solve this any better than the parents.
Right.
Yet, as Brett points out, there is a time when we'd want that. So all I can say here is proceed with extreme caution.
Well, what I don't like about this from day one, for whether it's the 50 counties now or by July the 1st, the deadline to do all 88 counties, my problem with this is structural. I think we already have a 911 system. We already have emergency response call-in centers. They came up with a 10-digit number that, I'm sorry, is an 8 or a 9-year-old. They know 911. They don't know a 10-digit.
Then you get into this thing. It's like,
it's ridiculous. Why can't the person who receives the call, the way I would resolve this with Governor DeWine is that you got 911 centers all over the state in existence right now. Why do you need a separate system? Somebody gets a call
who's
from
making money?
Yeah.
Well,
who gets a call from a child, right?
I want to know who's making money to set this up.
A 911, operator gets a call. That person should be able to decide or have the authority to decide to either refer this to the police or refer it to an MRD, a Department of Mental Health, and send a counselor.
And Brett, you just said, like, how did we get along for so long without such a crisis team?
Right.
And what's been going on now that says now we really, really need it?
This is a mental health SWAT team is what he's creating.
Right. Yeah. And as Thomas Sowell always says, such programs are always judged not on their effectiveness, but on their purpose, on their stated purpose. So we shall see. And like you said, the law of unintended consequences here is going to take over. And there's going to be things that are not so good about this. And it's going to cost lots and lots and lots of state taxpayer money. And we're all going to be looking at this in a few years saying, because you can't get rid of this once it's created.
Well, funny story. Yeah. So I'll tell you how the Murdoch household dealt with this. I had a
shudder to think.
Yeah. Well, so you know what? I called my son's bluff. I had my youngest son basically object that I took him off the computer after 1 hour. He got 1 hour per day, maximum, no more. So he headed out the bathroom window about 10 o'clock at night. He's going to run away from home. And he says, I'm going to call Children's Services. I'm leaving the house. And I reach into my pants, got out a quarter, and I said, I'll say, look, you don't have to run out of the house. Here's a quarter, symbolically. Mm-hmm. Call them. Call Children's Services. Call them right now. And you'll be eating like Campbell's soup with weenies and tomatoes, tomato soup. And you'll be in a house with, some foster family for 2 or 3 days till they figure out your mom and I are not monsters and we have a perfectly fine home and you have no bruises. Nobody's getting beaten here. But yeah, I have some strict rules and you're going to abide by them.
I remember
he stayed in the house.
We had one Saturday I had my sons, they were over at my place and I was like, what are we doing today, Dad? I said, we're going to learn how to clean hardwood floors.
Yeah.
And they looked at me like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, right.
And they were just, they pitched a fit.
Yeah.
But, we moved all the furniture. We got out the little Bona thing and we all cleaned the floors. And
did some chores.
Some chores. And they, at that point, we had counselors in our world and they're like, we just want a normal household. And the counselor just laughed at them. Like, what do you think is normal?
Exactly.
Like, what do you think this is? Like bubble gum and video games all day long?
Dad is teaching you responsibility.
Yeah. And
hello.
That's parenting, right?
That's parenting.
And maybe this is, we've circled back, Brett, to where we started, which is how did we get to the spot? And it's because we don't parent anymore.
Yeah.
Maybe there is that problem.
We want to be friends with our kids instead of being their parents.
And teaching a kid to do chores and clean up after themselves has become like this evil thing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
That is normal.
Hire a housekeeper to do that, Dad.
Yeah.
I'm not cleaning up my toys.
Right.
Anyway, right. A little bit about this parolees thing. This is so the Supreme Court they supported an appeals court in its motion to put a TRO on this program until it can be litigated. And what this program was the Biden program, where Biden violated the statute. And instead of following the statute, President Biden, instead of having a case-by-case analysis and hearing on each application for parole, where a person claims, I can't wait for asylum. I can't wait for, that kind of process. I'm in immediate danger of being, killed because of some political thing in Haiti or Venezuela or whatever back home. And so I am applying on this app to President Biden to be included in a mass parole. So Biden did not follow the statute, and he issued mass paroles of 530,000 people, all told, who flew in under this program and stayed. And we had 100,000 of them in, say, Springfield, Ohio, Haitians. That's how they got here under this program. And so what Trump proposed to do, and what he was in the process of doing, was reversing Biden's illegal non-due process activation of this statute. So Biden did no due process. And what the argument is that even though it'll take 30 years to do this, all 530,000 of these parolees are somehow being argued by their, pro-illegal immigrant attorneys. It's being argued that they have the right individually to have a due process deportation hearing, one by one, case by case. And, I would just say to Justice Roberts, when this gets litigated, hey, Justice Roberts, they came in without any due process. They came in on a violation of the statute that allows the president to grant parole. They should be eligible to be deported under the same exact circumstances, where there should not need to be a hearing. And what's interesting is the opposite. The political opponents to President Trump are lining up in, backing up the rights, if you will, of these parolees to have due process. But what's interesting is President Obama deported 3 million people, most of which had no due process hearing whatsoever, other than an administrative analysis by the Customs and Border Patrol, who they have courts inside these detention areas, and a hearing officer basically looks at their paperwork and says, yep, he can be deported. And they did that within 14 days under Obama to 3 million people. But somehow under Trump, we transmogrify what their due process rights are now. Go, Steve.
Well, it sounds like they have precedent. I mean, if it's done before, they have the right to do it, I guess.
I mean, look,
he's Obama. This is Trump.
I know.
The rules are different.
I saw some stats on the number of deportations going back all the way, I think, to Bush 1. And there were significantly more than the deportations going on under Trump, at least so far.
Right.
And now Trump's only had a few months. So that stat is a little bit askew.
Coming up on 100 days.
It's pretty close to it, isn't it?
It is a little bit askew. But I think what's important, and this is back to maybe where we started, right? Jan Cassius has a lean and hungry look about him. Such men are dangerous. I mean, people are out to stop Trump just because he's Trump. And I think this is the problem. Now, what I would say to Trump is tread a little bit lighter. You can still get all this done. You don't need to pound the table and shoot off fireworks here. Let's just get this done methodically, clearly. And I think Trump has a tendency, as I've pointed out, that we've discussed here and argued about perhaps, is that he tends to make a show out of things at times. And that doesn't serve him well. He's giving the other side fodder. And I think if...
So like Steve, you would think that, I know you've been busy with your case, but just so you know, So a couple of days ago, Catherine Levitt, the White House spokeslady, she brought on the mother of that, is it Rachel Morin, I think is the name?
Yep.
The mother of 5 children and 1 grandchild, brought that mother into the White House briefing room and had her talk about, well, what about my daughter's due process, right? She had her skull bashed in with a rock, and then she was raped up against a wall in a jogging park in D.C.
No. I don't have any problem with that. But what I do have a problem with, So look, but at the same time,
the media, right? Let me finish just 10 seconds. The media in the room turned off the cameras. I mean, CNN.
Yeah,
so there's clips. MSNBC, CNN turned off their feed from the White House briefing room. They don't want that story to populate.
Of course not.
So this is Trump. So when you talk a little bit about bombast, I would just balance that out with saying, although Trump is all over the map and he is kind of like the crazy president that nobody knows what he's going to do for, the guy who keeps other countries second guessing what he's going to do. I get all that. But I think he has to amp up what is the result of unfettered illegal immigration.
Well, that's right.
So I'm saying
I'm agreeing with you on that. So look, my message would be, folks, I'm not doing anything anybody else hasn't done.
Yeah.
I'm not enacting any new policy.
Yeah.
I'm simply undoing all the wrongs of the Biden administration, consistent with what Obama did, consistent with what Bush did, consistent with what Clinton did, consistent with all these other presidents.
Yeah.
And, to the extent you want to start to make your point, you would say things like he's doing. It is interesting to me that the media doesn't care about the bad stuff that's happening as a result of this.
Exactly.
They only want to oppose me because I'm me.
Right.
And I am saying to you, I'm not doing anything different than the other presidents. Now look, is that going to make the splash? No. But what I'm talking about that I think was ill-advised is Kristi Noem posing in front of this cage of people behind her. I don't know if you saw that picture.
I did.
And, I don't think that's a good look. I mean, I
don't either.
And that's the kind of stuff that's going to get you flack. You don't need to do that.
I like that she went there to inspect the living conditions of the people we're deporting.
Yes.
I think is her role. I think that's part of her role. I agree with you that posing with them in cages like they're animals.
Right. Bad look.
Bad look.
Bad look.
I would not have done it. And she did it in tight fitting. She was clearly showing off her feminine physique.
Right.
And it wasn't necessary. And people have noted that.
Yeah.
A lot of her pictures, she's a beautiful lady. But why are you posing in a picture where shirtless men
or
in cages?
Who's it for?
Who's it for?
Who's it for?
And it's, to me, and I'll answer that, it's for Trump.
Yeah.
It's showing off for him.
So
they get accolades. Yeah. Look at, she's my gal, or he's my guy. And, some of it, I just, sometimes it feels that way.
But yeah,
it's like,
let me counterpose something, right? So we talked extensively about lawfare against Trump prior to him becoming president, because they wanted to, they were taking him off ballots and they had to restore his name. They were trying to put him in prison. This case on the stupid the collateral value of Mar-a-Lago, where they say he overstated what it was worth, and of course Letitia James is in her own little pickle on lying on a mortgage application. All of this stuff, lawfare. So the new lawfare now, there are over 100 national TROs or injunctions against Trump. And they've looked back at other presidents, just like Steve looked back on immigration. They've looked back on these national injunctions by district courts. And Trump is like, if you add up the last 6 presidents, he's garnered over 100 of these, which is more than the total of the last 6 presidents combined. So clearly the new lawfare is to try to stop him by abusing, I'll say that, abusing the federal judicial system. And I would just say, look, this is his bailiwick. He gets to do foreign policy.
They being the opposition, these folks who want to oppose Trump at every stage, no matter what it is,
because
if it's Trump, it's wrong.
Yeah, that's
right. I remember Kamala Harris saying on stage that if the vaccine were Trump's, she wouldn't take it. I remember that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then 2 months later, it was the most important thing that, in fact, everybody has to take it.
Right.
So the point is that they're opposing Trump just because he's Trump and not looking behind what he's trying to do. And they do that at their own peril.
Yes,
they do that at their own peril.
Right.
And this is one of my favorite quotes. This is the Man for All Seasons, where, now you give the devil the benefit of the law. And Sir Thomas More says, yes, what would you do? Cut a great road through the law to get after the devil? Yes, I'd cut down every law in England to do that. Oh, and when the last law was down and the devil turned around on you, where would you hide, Roper? The law's all being flat. This country is planted thick with laws from coast to coast, man's law, not God's. And if you cut them down and you'd be just the man to do it, do you really think you could stand upright in the winds that blow you then? Yes, I'd give the devil the benefit of the law for my own safety's sake. And this is what they're doing. And it's what they've done. So they set these precedents, and they will suffer the consequences when their man or their gal is sitting in the White House. They will suffer this. And this is the old Mitch McConnell. It's like, I told you so.
Let me give you an example that I just dreamed up, Steve. So we know what Biden did. He kind of created precedent with Fauci and other people on prospective prosecutions for crimes they haven't been charged with, and for trials that they're not in, and for convictions that haven't happened. It's prospective, right? Forgiveness, or what do they call it? When the president does not expunges, but
pardons.
Pardons. Thank you. I couldn't get the word. And so what I'm thinking is, on all of this, like Garcia, where this judge is about to issue, orders that you're in contempt of court and start fining people at the Department of Homeland Security because they're not facilitating his return.
Beware.
Hey, Trump can pardon them prospectively. He can say, hey, Kristi Noem and other people at DHS that are involved in this,
You're hereby pardoned.
You're hereby pardoned. Stick
when
that right up your butt, Judge.
Under the guise of taking down a man called Trump, his opponents are willing to sacrifice all the protections that have been in place. And not just ones that are written down, but ones that have been honored through tradition.
Right.
And they do that at their own peril. Because
Steve,
it won't be long before the other side's in power.
You say many times, and I love this quote of yours. I'm going to butcher it, but basically, our government won't work unless people of good hearts, essentially this is what people who of good patriotism want it to work. If you don't want it to work, right, we're going to be at the Supreme Court. I mean, Justice Roberts is going to be hearing these cases every week, every day. If the two sides don't decide, hey, we want the country to work. We're not going to take everything.
Can we decide as a country, as I think anybody who looks at this at the unlawful immigration, I think anybody who looks at that would say, yeah, that got out of control.
Yeah.
It was totally out of control.
Yeah.
So can we decide that was out of control and we need to do something to fix it? And other than saying, well, since Trump is doing it, it must be bad. and look, and what that does to Trump's on Trump's part is it brings out the worst in him.
Yeah.
Because then he's the guy that'll start slinging mud back.
Yeah.
Like it brings out the worst in him, and they know that.
Right. He shouldn't have to pardon these people. That's ridiculous. Right. But if they're going to get to the point where they're going to take Tom Homan, you're going to go to prison because you didn't do what this district court judge says, Trump's going to pardon him. That's what's going to happen.
Right. So it's just this seesaw of stupidity that gets nothing done.
Yeah.
And all I can say is we are toying with these fundamental structures that have been in place for our entire existence.
Yeah.
We're toying with this stuff.
Yeah.
And it just can't be good.
No.
But definitely pushing the elasticity of what it is.
Right.
And hopefully the rubber band doesn't break.
You're going to have at some point Trump, and his favorite president is Andrew Jackson, which is a little scary.
It is a little scary if anybody studies him.
Yeah, which, he's the guy who ended the U.S. bank. He got rid of the bank. He also told the Supreme Court that they could take, if you have a division, if you have an army, send them down to Georgia and North Carolina to block me from making the Cherokee Nation leave the eastern states and force them to go west on the Trail of Tears. He basically told the Supreme Court found against him.
He did it anyway.
He did it anyway.
Yeah.
Do we really want Trump? Why that is not going to be good for the country?
It's bad for everybody.
No.
It's bad for everybody, man.
Right.
And but here's what it is. I think here's what I'm really trying to say that just dawned on me that might be obvious. It's almost as if they're doing this on purpose in order to set Trump up for something like that. They know their response, and they're doing it only to get him.
To get a constitutional crisis.
Just to get him, to develop, to get him. And that's not, look, don't we all love the country?
Yeah, I would hope.
Really, don't we love the country?
You would hope you would love the country and its privileges allowed to us.
Yes.
If nothing else.
It is
because we have a ton of privileges and rights, whatever you want to call it. Because now I'm hearing it's not really rights, it's privileges. If it can be taken away, it's like, okay, there are rights, but I'm just saying
we also have rights and privileges. Both are sacred.
Both. A lot of countries don't have what we have.
That's
so
right.
we
not
need
even close.
Not even close. So if not,
and we get mocked for it by those other countries.
We definitely
they don't understand the Second Amendment, for example.
Right.
In England, they don't even understand our First Amendment. You know, like we talked about the lady on the sidewalk who was just silent.
Mm-hmm.
And the cop went up to her and said, well, what are you thinking? And she said, I'm praying for those women over there who are having abortions across the street.
She ends up in cuffs.
It's
crazy.
I mean, what is that?
Yeah.
See, this is the experiment that we have here it's the freest existence that's ever been created in humanity that we know about. You know, maybe there was other humanities that existed before us, but the ones that we know about, this has got to be the freest. I mean, it's got to be.
It's got to be.
And it's not always perfect, and it's been really, really imperfect at times and really, really bad at times. But like the way things exist right now, we have these people protesting. They're literally protesting their own freedom on their iPhones that they, it's like, it is insanity.
It is insanity.
It is insanity.
Yeah. Well, a little reprieve on. We talked last week about the Chillicothe paper plant, 800 jobs. That is the anchor industry in the city of Chillicothe, which used to be the capital of Ohio, by the way. Chillicothe, Ohio, the paper plant there got a reprieve. So our friend who was here in studio, now U.S. Senator Bernie Moreno, led the effort. He said this is private equity buying out this paper plant years ago, and then deciding, because they're not Ohioans, like they could care less about Chillicothe. They just decided this plant is costing them too much, and they're going to remove operations, which is their right. I mean, it shouldn't be against the law, but somebody should speak for these workers. And Bernie Moreno went in, led a rally. The owners of the paper plant crumpled and said, okay, they can keep their jobs until January 1st of 2026, by which time we will seek out a solution. Either another company buys our plant or we retool here and make this a viable factory. So that's good. I mean, because those people were going to get 60-day notices. They had gotten them.
Yeah.
So good for our senator. I like to see them get involved in local issues. It's not all at the federal level. Take care of our people here at home. So good on Bernie, for stepping up for those people.
Yeah. Well, at least being a middleman and a negotiator, or at least how can we save this?
That's right.
Situation. And maybe it's not savable. We don't know. I mean, potentially, but I didn't realize until Moreno started talking about it, I didn't realize it was a holding company business. I was like, okay, I missed that.
Yeah.
And I kind of, okay, that makes sense that they have no soul in it to know they got to take care of it.
And this might actually feed back into the tariff thing. So if there is a tariff on foreign paper coming in, perhaps that allows Ohio paper companies, for example, to be able to undercut foreign competition because they will not be paying. Obviously, their customers don't pay a tariff on something made in Ohio. Yeah. So this could be part of the reshoring of industry.
Maybe, or at least under the guise of it to make some forward movements to keep industry here.
So I saw on India, agricultural equipment and Harley Davidson's and other vehicles and machinery was 85% tariff to be brought to India, and negotiating that down now to near zero. So that could benefit the paper plant too.
Yeah.
The same kind of thing.
Sure.
Other Ohio news: Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel, famously coach of Ohio State, later president of Youngstown State University, which is as stated, a public university. He's now lieutenant governor of Ohio. He stated he's not running for governor. So I think Brett suspects that might be a false flag.
I don't know.
Maybe not.
I don't have any tea leaves to read. It just, I think if he, as we said off mic, if he has a few dinners with a few well-heeled funders, it may change his mind. I don't know. I mean, that they may not like Vivek's point of view or Yost point of view, but they really love him.
The scent of power is a tough one to avoid.
It is. And who hasn't said, no, I'm not running, and then a few months later say,
well, you're right about that.
I've had a lot of people talk to me, and they've convinced me that
for the good of the state.
Yes, for the good of the state.
I'll set aside
I'm a Buckeye.
Yes. You're right.
And this is not anything against Jim Tressel. I'm assuming he's a nice guy and he's human. But hey, politics is politics.
So we got some good and bad.
Yeah, let's do that. We can talk about the Google antitrust case next week. That's an interesting case, and a couple other things. But yeah, my outrage would be, I'm calling this in on my own Congressman, Troy Balderson. So last week, former President Biden gave a big speech in Chicago, which was his coming out party. I think he got paid something like $350,000 for this speech in Chicago. And one of the things he bragged about was a bill sponsored by Ohio's Republican Congressman Troy Balderson. And what that bill was is to give double dippers, federal workers, federal employees that are double dippers who are benefiting from their federal pension. So they're retired, they're from one job, and that had a federal pension. And then they go, say, from the Department of Defense, they had a pension. Then they go to work for the post office, let's say, which is a very common thing, or they go work for the IRS or whatever. And now they're paying into Social Security. And so when they retire and there's this overlap, there was something in the law called basically taking advantage of the American people, because they're getting paid the full amount of their Social Security, if were it not for this earlier proviso, and they obviously they're getting their full pension. So what Balderson and Biden did is they passed this legislation that Biden is now bragging about that allows them to receive full Social Security on top of their full pension. And although this only affects people in that transition period between when the federal government had pensions and now they're on Social Security, it still affects a few 100,000 former federal employees. And I think that's outrageous myself. Because you and I can't do that.
No.
But they can do it.
Yeah, it's true. Well, my outrage, as I mentioned earlier, in regards to just the comments against the situation with Pope and JD Vance and such like that. But I think this is a good thing. There's school policies banning LifeWise treats and trinkets opens them to lawsuits, LifeWise attorney says. So as everybody's heard, I'm not a LifeWise Academy fan in regards to inserting themselves into school through legislation and such. But they're saying an attorney representing LifeWise is warning Ohio school districts that they could be sued if they use a model policy preventing religious release groups from providing materials, candies, or trinkets to the students. Well, as a parent, I can't go in and bring in candy either.
I think they mean during instruction by LifeWise.
Oh, no. When they bring it back to school. Then
they give the trinkets. Yeah, I wouldn't be in favor.
Yeah. So I think that's a good thing, because they're shining light on. It's like, it's marketing material, folks.
Yeah.
Come on, give me a break. So I think this is a good thing. Bring it on, bring the lawsuit on, because I think it's going to showcase that, folks, you're recruiting. You're grooming. If you want to, I'll call it grooming. I'll call it that. You're trying to bring people in during the day. You're already disrupting the day. Stop it. You got your 2 hours a day.
Well, on my part, I've been out. I've been out in a hearing out in one of the counties in Ohio. I'm not going to say which county, but I was out in a hearing, and I had one of my colleagues with me, and we got into this discussion about some outrageous stuff that we were both watching in the system, in the criminal justice system. And for those who know, I represent folks charged with crimes. Not often are they real. If you look at the crimes that they're accused of committing, whether they actually did it or not, they're often not the most, maybe the most reprehensible crimes that you can imagine, right? So I represent people in really bad situations. Mm-hmm. And I encountered something in this hearing where this guy was accused of a crime, and even the jailers were doing things like tipping off the other inmates and saying, this guy's in this cell or this guy's in this cell. Then one of the jailers was on the Facebook, on the Twitter or whatever it is, tweeting about this case that happened to be going on in court in that county. I find that insanely outrageous.
Oh yeah.
And it led into a discussion with my colleague about, he's from Michigan, and there's some stuff going on in the case where the parents were convicted of crimes when the son went in and committed a school shooting. I think people are familiar with that case. And it turns out there was a pretty egregious discovery violation. Key witnesses in that case got deals that the prosecutor didn't tell the defense about. So in other words, the witnesses had a motive. And my point is back to the man for all seasons quote. It's like, we are, it's not new territory. We've been here a long time. I mean, those quotes have been around for a long time, but
yeah,
we are in a situation where people are willing up and down the ladder to forgo the basic protections because their cause is right.
Yeah.
And I find that outrageous. I find it outrageous. And in fact, that's what motivates me to do what I do, not to help somebody who's actually committed horrible things.
Right.
But it's to protect against those who wouldn't. And I find it insanely outrageous that stuff goes on. And it was going on in these situations by government actors.
Yeah, that's terrible.
By government actors. And the other side of my case, they were taking positions and arguments only to find some reason not to give this guy relief because they believed in their cause so much. So, be careful. Again, that's my message of the day. Tread with caution.
Right.
Because you give this stuff away and it never comes back.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The idea that, like, as despicable as he was, Jeffrey Dahmer being shivved while he's serving his prison sentence is clearly wrong. I mean, if the state is not putting him to death, a fellow inmate has absolutely no right to beat him up and kill him.
But the question is, was he assisted by a guard turning a blind eye to something? And it wouldn't surprise me.
Oh no, they turn away. Oh, I don't see that fight on the exercise ground.
Yeah, makes a great movie, but it doesn't make great life.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Now look, my wonderful. At the same time, I went out to a county where often you go out and you're unknown, and you're the outsider, the enemy, so to speak.
Yeah. Not
in the least. These folks out there treated me with the utmost courtesy and respect. And thank you all. You know who you are if you're listening. It was phenomenal. And the courtroom deputies who were there to maintain order, absolute pros. It couldn't have been any better. I actually went up and I went up to tell the gentleman that, and my colleague had already beat me to it because, and we hadn't talked about it. We both experienced and felt the same thing.
Yeah.
So in the course of human affairs, we have both bad and good, and hopefully somewhere in the middle of the two meet.
Yeah, that's excellent.
That's great.
That's good to hear.
Yeah,
man.
it is. Exactly.
You got a good, wonderful?
That was the LifeWise. That's a good one. I think it's good, wonderful to shed light on this.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, that's what that was.
My wonderful is just what we talked about at the top of the show. I think it's wonderful, even, right with all the differences that I have. I went to a Jesuit high school, so I'm very familiar with the Jesuits, and Pope Francis was the only Jesuit pope so far. And so whatever about that, but I am touched very deeply that he participated in Easter Mass in St. Peter's Square, and he went out on his own terms. He did not resign. He died the next morning, and I think God had something to do with it.
Yeah. It would sound like.
Yeah.
Well, good night, good night, good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say good night till it be tomorrow. That's Romeo and Juliet for you scholars. Or you could follow The Tempest. Our revels are now ended. That is Common Sense Ohio, commonsenseohioshow.com. And you can check us out at the website. You can check us out on the all the social media platforms. You can watch us live right here, streaming at you week in and week out. If you've got questions, topics, anything you want us to cover, just shoot us a question, shoot us a comment, do whatever you do to get in touch with us, because we're out there. Brought to you week in and week out, of course, right from the middle by Harper Plus Accounting. See you next week.
All right.